Hi everyone, Ryan from Slow Your Roll here. Today I'm going to be shooting a follow-up to my previous video, Broken Items on the Airstream. If you haven't seen that video, please check it out. It's a great resource for folks that are going to be taking possession of the Airstream and issues that they need to be looking out for prior to taking delivery from the dealership. With that being said, this video is just going to highlight the timeline, my general experience with the Camping World Service Department, and I'll cover each issue that was previously discussed. First of all, the timeline. I called and was able to get a service appointment within a week, which was a surprise considering the enormous amount of RVs that are in for service right now and getting ready for camping season. So I dropped it off on a Tuesday. Camping World was extremely flexible with that. It was just a day that worked with my work schedule. So I dropped it off early, and to my surprise, they called me 4 days later saying that the RV was complete. If you'll remember, I didn't have a whole lot of significant issues, or a lot of them were just quick fixes. However, with the rear hatch, I wanted them to make sure that they took their time and fixed it correctly on the first time go. So we'll go over that in detail, and you'll see if they've actually fixed it or not. As far as the experience, I dealt with Kristen. She is an Airstream certified technician, so she was my go-between as far as the Airstream specific issues in Camping World Service Department. She did the overall diagnostics of the problems. She served as kind of a liaison between Airstream Incorporated and Camping World Service Department. And then finally, she was the quality control at the end of the, upon completion of all the service. Overall, the experience was quick. They covered most of the issues, not all of them. We'll go into that in greater detail in the video. But it was a positive experience. I've seen tons of Reddit posts and YouTube videos where people are just not having a great experience with Camping World. And I'm sure each individual Camping World has its own issues, but thus far, between Camping World Oklahoma's sales department and service department, I'm very satisfied. All right, so if you'll remember, the first issue we had was with the foam pad that goes over the front door to avoid bumping your head. One of the clips had popped out and a couple of washers had fallen down. So let's take a look at that real quick. See, as this comes into focus, you can see that the clip has been re-engaged. The write-up on the actual paperwork is that these clips in here are plastic, and what they did was they just reseated that plastic clip. Obviously it's nice and tight right now, so you're not going to be able to see it. In a jam, what I realize you can do is if that thing pops out on you and you're on the road, you're not near a service center, you can kind of just put some pressure on there and pop it back in. So it's a really easy fix. Moving on to the shower. The issue we had in here was the actual mount for the shower had come off the wall. So what they did was they relocated it, drilled some new holes, and then put some longer screws in there. So it is nice and tight right now. Something you want to be cognizant of when using the water pump, it doesn't create a steady flow of water, it kind of pulsates. So that's going to cause the shower head to shake, and I think that may have been a contributing problem to the original bracket coming off. So keep an eye on that. It may just require upgrading to a better shower head. As we move towards the back and the back hatch, what you'll notice different about this is it's nice and tight now. There's no gap and no light coming through. That was the issue we were having before, is because of the strike plate position, it was not connecting with the top of the hatch. We'll go outside and I'll cover in more detail, but they weren't able to actually fix it completely. So it does close, it does lock. However, upon arrival to our harvest host, immediately after picking this up from service, we noticed that the hatch had popped out. We did go over a pretty bumpy road, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to kind of play with the strike plate to see if I can fix it myself before bringing it all the way back. Here's the top of the rear hatch, and you'll see the latch bolt right here, which retracts when you either use the handle or the inside handle right here. So that's what wasn't making contact. With the strike plate right here. So what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to move this a little bit further back and maybe add some washers to enhance the depth and the distance, and hopefully that'll help fix the problem when going down the road. But when it's stationary, closing the door is simple. It does engage. So when we try to close the hatch, you'll see you get that nice tight seal that we were missing before on the bottom and on the top. Moving inside, looking for any light. We don't see any, so we know we have a good solid seal. One of the issues I failed to cover on the previous video was the black tank flush valve. This is a very common problem. I see this in a lot of forums and on the base camp owners group, but when you actually connect a hose to this and turn the water on, nothing happens. It's almost like the valve is turned off. Looking at the service paperwork, basically what happened is it's plumbed incorrectly, and there's a vacuum valve that the Airstream or Camping World technician has to go in and change around in order for that water to pump through. Having that operational is important, because when you have solids in your black tank and it might not be full, you can add a little water and that will drive the solids out when you open the black tank flush valve. And then the last thing Camping World did was install the Battleborn 100 amp hour dual lithium phosphate batteries. So previously they were AGM. In this, if you're unfamiliar where the batteries are located in the base camp, right to the right of where the refrigerator stack is, there's a small little cubby. You remove a couple of screws. There's just a little service panel right here. Remove the screws from here, and then this just slides out of the way. And then normally inside here, they have this big honking battery box. See if we can get a picture of that. Because these are lithium and they don't need to be vented like lead acid, I opted to remove this because I'm going to be installing an inverter in the future. So I'm looking for a little bit extra space. This thing just took up too much space. In addition, I like to be able to access my batteries in case there's an issue. This thing took me a good 15 minutes to take off. One in part because the service technician stripped the screws going back into the battery box. So I had to get my trusty hacksaw and cut a couple of the screws. In addition, at the top of the SETI right here, there's an access panel to get to the top of the battery box. Now I want to cover some of the common problems identified in the base camp owners group that's available on Facebook. In the event, like myself, you don't have a Facebook account, I rely on my wife to pass the messages along. One of the owners was kind enough to consolidate all the issues into a spreadsheet so you can go to the one place and track the issues. Some of them are common issues, others are unique. So the first one right off the top of the list is the rear hatch and the door coming unsecured while in travel or in transit. The second one is the furnace not getting above 60 degrees. We noticed this early on, the first couple nights of camping when it was really cold out. Come to find out, we had a significant gap in the rear hatch. Once that was addressed and we went to a harvest host that night, we ran the propane and the heat, and it got plenty warm in here. So we haven't noticed that issue yet, but it's something that we'll definitely keep our eye on. There's a few comments on the various tank monitoring systems and an issue with the fresh water not pumping at a certain percentage. Having owned a boat, I know that the tank monitoring systems go south after a while. So it's just knowing the size of your tanks, knowing the utilization rates and having an idea of how long it takes you to go through fresh water or to fill up your gray and black tanks, because eventually those things will fail. I don't think they should be failing on a brand new base camp. It's probably after a few years, but if it is failing, obviously get it taken care of. The other thing that I saw was the fresh tank not pumping at a certain percentage, and I can't remember if this was through the shakedown, through a forum, but there was a few people that identified the fresh water stops pumping below about a 25% threshold, give or take. I have to assume that has to do with wherever the piping is for the water pump. Obviously, if it's below the pipe level, it's not going to pump, and you're definitely going to want to shut your water pump off, because it's just going to continually search for that water to build pressure, and it's going to run, and eventually it's going to burn out. So just be cognizant of what your tanks are at. We've got a member that identifies the main door, the top of it. The left corner of the main door is catching on the threshold even when the trailer is level. I haven't experienced that issue yet, but again, if your trailer is level and you're not slamming that door shut, there shouldn't be any issues with the door being balanced. Another one mentions when setting up the bed, when you're grabbing those two boards from the top netting there, they fit into a little slot that's cut out on either bench, on the left and right bench. They're supposed to fit flush, and this individual has identified that he has to actually force them in. Not a problem on my base camp, but those things should fit. I would imagine even if it's really humid out and the wood is kind of saturated. Several comments on quality control with just delamination and the floor coming up. Just it's a RV enclosed space. Similar to a boat, you have to really worry about condensation issues. So what we did was we purchased a dehumidifier for the base camp, hopefully to alleviate condensation buildup. Water is not your friend inside these things, so my advice is definitely invest in a good dehumidifier. They do sell 12-volt dehumidifiers, and then what we have is a rechargeable one. So once it fills up to its capacity, you take it out, plug it into a 120-volt plug, and science happens and it resets itself. A couple comments on the door handles or the clips falling off. I've noticed that too. If it's just a clip, it's easy to push back on. The magnetic catch bolts that I previously mentioned having to replace, that's an issue. Some people mention the actual cabinets coming off. The cabinets are made of glass, so if that's a significant issue to watch out for, because glass will break. I haven't had those issues yet, thankfully. Rear door hatch would not latch from the outside. I had a few issues with that. What I had to do is I just had to play with the key, moving it clockwise and counterclockwise just to kind of find that happy medium. But eventually I did get it. And then another one is, the final one on this is a propane smell inside the RV. I haven't experienced it yet. There is a LP tank or an LP monitor inside the base camp that you're definitely going to want to make sure is working and operational. I have seen previous Airstream YouTube videos that owners do complain of propane smells, and a few that have actually gotten sick. So again, if you do smell propane, shut your propane tanks off, bring it in for service. That's something that you definitely don't want to mess around with. Thanks again for watching this video. I hope it was informative. Again, my experience with Camping World Service Department was really good. I will monitor that rear hatch. I'm going to play around to see if I can fix it myself. It's just better than having to drive 3 hours to get the issue fixed if it's, something I can do myself. Please stay tuned for future videos. Next one I'm going to be doing is installing a inverter, and I'll kind of go over the base camp's electrical system the solar and the lithium upgrades. For anyone that's interested in those packages, they are expensive, and what may drive you to, or inspire you to opt for that packages depending on your camping style. So until next time, take care.